Assalamu alaikum. So, welcome to the lecture number 4. We will continue from the same topic where we left. The last topic that we discussed was, let me check, it was, yes, it was AC to DC converters, and the last subtopic of this topic was diode rectifier plus DC to DC converters. Now, the next topic inside the power modulators is DC to AC converters. Specifically, DC to AC converters are also known as inverters. Yes, these are the same inverters that you people use inside your house for as UPS, which we call UPS, right? So why do we call it DC to AC converters? The reason for that is that at the backup point from where it gets its electricity, you have a DC supply. From the DC supply, I'm basically referring to a battery. Okay, so you have seen all the mini inverters where like the mini inverters such as your UPS or maybe inside the car where you use an inverter for some purpose. So always at the back end there is always a 12-volt battery, right? And by using the inverter you convert DC electricity into AC electricity. Now we have two types of inverters. One is voltage source inverter, the second one is current source inverter. Now, uh, I was thinking that nobody ever asked me that why do we have so many types inside the power modulator? The answer to that is that since we need to control our motor inside in the system, so for that purpose we need a lot of parameters where we can, by which tweaking one parameter we can change the parameters, the running parameters of a motor, and you will be viewing it or we will be discussing it in our later lectures. But at the moment, whatever I am giving you to read it out, so just keep on understanding the concepts. We will later on see how we apply these concepts practically. Okay, then comes an AC to AC converter. Okay, wait. Uh, we do understand that we have an AC to DC converter, but why do we specifically study DC to AC converter? Nowadays, DC to AC converters are quite into market, and the reason behind that is not the battery, but because of the solar technology that is available these days. The solar technology is getting very cheaper day by day, although it is quite expensive yet in our country because of certain reasons. But in developed countries such as Scandinavian countries and maybe the Western countries, this the solar technology is quite cheap nowadays, and you might even have seen some tests regarding the solar cars. Okay, now we come to the AC to AC converter. Okay, what it does is there are two types, and one is called AC voltage regulator, and the other one is called cyclo converter. Now, what is the difference between an AC voltage regulator and a cyclo converter? Now, remember, an AC voltage regulator is will always convert a fixed frequency, fixed voltage to a variable voltage and fixed frequency. That is to say, a regulator is capable of changing the amplitude of voltage or changing the rating of the voltage, but the output frequency will remain the same as of the input frequency. However, in cycle of converters, you are free to convert or maybe to change the amplitude of the voltage, that is the rating of the voltage, and the frequency as well. So you change the fixed voltage and fixed frequency into variable ones. Now let's get back to the power supplies. Now there is a difference between a power modulator and a power supply. I hope you don't confuse it. Okay. Now power supply refers to the basic input power supply. However, the power modulator is something that is capable of changing specific parameters of that very supplied power. Now, inside the power supply, we have AC power supply, and in AC power supply, you know that we have single phase power supply and we have three phase power supply. Uh, Currently, if you go and see different or various items that are available in the market which run by AC power supply, you probably would see 50 hertz or maybe 60 hertz, or maybe on some items you you will see 50 hertz slash 60 hertz. If you see Pakistani ceiling fans, you probably will find 50 slash 60 hertz. So that does make certain difference, but that specific item is capable of handling an AC frequency of 50 hertz as well as 60 hertz. But if something is specifically rated for 50 hertz, then you have to run it on 50 hertz. And if something is specifically rated for 60 hertz, then you have to run it with 60 hertz. But something that has this in its specification, if it's mentioned that it can be run with both 50 hertz and 60 hertz, then you are safe to use whether 50 hertz or whether 60 hertz. But we will see that what difference does this frequency actually make. This will be coming shortly ahead. Now, for low and medium power drives, we will use 400 volt three phase 50 hertz, or maybe for maybe you use 220 volt single phase 50 hertz. Uh, just to give you an example, you will see that the induction motor that you use in your home, that is in fact that is rated for 220 volt, right? But the motor that is run in the big tube wells, that is rated for 440 volt. So technically you can write 400 or 440 volt for that, or maybe 200 or 220 volts. It depends upon you that what do we want to how do we specify it. So 200 or 220 volt, it doesn't make any much of the difference. Now for high power drives, we use 3.3 kV, 6.6 kV and 11 kV. We will not be discussing much of the higher power drives because they are very complicated. So we will only limit ourselves in this course for uh, to low and medium power drives, right? Now, as I discussed that what difference does the frequency make? So here comes the example. Now, in case of the aircraft AC power supply, 400 hertz is used. Why we use that? Let me give you the answer. Now, we use 400 hertz for that because that whenever your frequency gets higher, so the magnetizing components that you need, their weight reduces. Why? Because you get more of the magnetizing effect with higher frequencies as compared to the lower frequencies. So as you go higher in the frequencies, the weight of that very object reduces. Okay, so this is the reason in the aircrafts we have a limitation of the weight that it should carry. So in order to reduce that very weight, we increase the frequency from 50 hertz or 60 hertz to 400 hertz so that the magnetizing component's weight can be reduced. Now let us go ahead. Okay, now for the electric traction and locomotives, the main line is usually 25 kV and run at 50 hertz. Now, what is electric traction? That we will be discussing in the next coming lectures, in the very later lectures. Okay, but at the moment, just remember these terms that so that you have some taste for that. But I will just let you know that we will use electric traction for electric vehicles and for the locomotives, for the electric locomotives, and what purpose to and what are they there for, that we will be discussing in the coming lectures. But yes, their applications are, as I told you, their applications are in electric vehicles and in the electric trains. Now the next supplies is regarding the DC power supplies. So for DC power supplies, we have solar power, and the next one maybe is the battery of some suitable voltage. Now these days in the European countries, they are quite emphasizing on the solar power to harvest the solar power. And why do they do that? Because they do it for the purpose that they don't want to destroy the environment with the pollutants, such as if you generate electricity with the help of oil. So the electric generators produce a lot of noise. They also produce a lot of pollution in the air. So what the Europeans are doing these days is that they are harvesting the solar power, and they are delivering it or transmitting it, or maybe they are converting it into the AC power supply and then delivering it to the customer. But mostly they are now even introducing the electric cars, and they have also done some experiments for introducing the uh, solar running cars. Okay, now up till this topic, we have finished the topic of the power supplies and the power modulators. But maybe you have a question in your mind that, okay, fine, we have all these control parameters, and we can control a motor as per our requirements, but what is the advantage? Why do we do that? Now, the advantage of the electric drives, the very first advantage of the electric drives is the absence of the mechanical gear. Now, previously, electric drives had majority of its applications in the industrial area, but with the advent of, or but with the invention of the electric cars, it got very much attention within for the applications of these electric cars. And why? Now let me tell you. Now if you have seen a conventional car, you would find a gear inside it, like which we use like for first gear, second gear, third and fourth and fifth gear, right? Some of the cars might not be having the fifth gear, but the modern cars do have the fifth gear. Now what happens, uh, if you can control a motor without having gears into it, so look what advantage it is giving you in terms of cost, in terms of maintenance, and hence it is reducing the price to operate that machine. Such as, let me give you an example. Now let us say if you are driving a motor that is using a gear. Now, first of all, your gear needs a lot of maintenance. Number two, you have to change the oil of that gear after some time. You might also, maybe your gears are you get damaged due to some reason, maybe because you accelerate the car so much in a low gear, okay, or maybe you need a lot of torque and your gears are quite high, so it will again damage the car. But in terms of electric car, you do not need any kind of gear. You can accelerate from 0 to about, maybe you can get a speed of 0 to 100 or maybe 120 within the single gear. You don't need to shift the gears because it uses an induction motor. An induction motor is okay with that torque. Okay, now the second thing is that the electric drives are quite efficient. Why? Because the power converters have higher efficiency. Now since you are electronic students, you know why the power converters have higher efficiency. Now the third advantage that I already discussed, that this is a non-polluting technology. Now the fourth thing is that we can get 4 quadrant operations. In the coming lecture, I'll be discussing what is a four quadrant operation, but at the moment, you just keep in mind that with the help of an with the help of an industrial drive, you also get an advantage of a 4 quadrant operation. What is a 4 quadrant operation? It is basically motoring, braking with reversing speed. Okay. Now, what are these terminologies? We will be discussing it in the coming lecture. In the next lecture that I'll be giving you in the coming week. And then the fifth advantage is wide range of speed, power, and torque, as I discussed in the electric motors. Now, uh, this is the end of the basics that I wanted you guys to know. From the coming class, I mean in the next week, uh, like not this coming week, like the week after this coming week, we will be going into detail of each thing that we have discussed, right? So, what happens here is that if you have any question right now, or maybe you do not understand anything, so do ask me now. The reason I gave you so much time in so that you can understand each and everything clearly, so you do not have any kind of doubts later on. Now, if something is not clear, this is also why I am uploading the lecture quite earlier, so you have sufficient time to read other material with it as well. So if you have any question, do ask me. Do not let any of your doubts uh, do not let any of your doubts to remain in your mind. If you have any type of question, do ask me. You are more than welcome for a question, and I will try to help you as much as I can. Okay. Uh, so in the coming lecture, be prepared. We will be discussing some other important terminologies that we have discussed in here, and we will be going into detail regarding that. The course is quite easy. Don't worry. Uh, Till now, what we have covered, I usually cover all these topics in a single lecture. But knowing the fact that we are doing it online, so I am again saying that I am giving you quite some time so that you have enough time to understand things. I am going quite slow with you people. Okay, so I am ending the lecture now. And yes, one important thing, make sure that you always completely watch the YouTube video. Now, in the previous semester, I remember some of the guys were downloading the lecture. You are more than welcome to download the lecture. But what happens is that some softwares that you use, what they do is, suppose if the lecture is of 30 minutes, so it only downloads first 15 minutes or 16 minutes or 18 minutes. It does not download the whole lecture due to some reason, maybe because of the internet speed or whatever, maybe the reason. So that is why you first watch complete lecture on the YouTube and then download the lecture so you have it in your backup. Okay, I don't want you guys to miss anything. That is why I'm repeatedly saying to first watch the video on YouTube and then download the lecture so that you can watch it later on. Okay, now have a nice day, and I hope there should be no problem. Goodbye, take care.